Hello class, welcome to another lesson in biology. Today we are going to be looking at the nitrogen cycle. I'm Miss Eugenia Ntuaminsa. Let's begin. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to describe the nitrogen cycle, explain the importance of the nitrogen cycle to plants and animals, and explain the human influence on the nitrogen cycle. So we have our key terms: fixation, assimilation, nitrification, nitrifying bacteria, ammonification, and denitrification. So when we talk about nitrogen cycle, we are looking at the ways in which nitrogen is cycled through nature, the processes it goes through from it being a gaseous substance, mainly nitrogen gas, and cycling through nature and finally returning as a gaseous substance, a nitrogen gas, to go through that cycle again. So nitrogen is an element required to make proteins. Your proteins in your body, your hair, your nails, every single part of your body is formed from proteins. And mainly these proteins are made from nitrogen as an element. There are other elements that come into play to form proteins. Plants also have this, and nitrogen is essential for both plants and animals. Unfortunately, neither plants nor animals can absorb it from the air as nitrogen gas. So how do you and I get the nitrogen gas? So the nitrogen gas, which is in nature in its gaseous state, is converted to other forms which can be then absorbed by the plant or the animal. We animals have the advantage of taking in plants. So when we feed on plants, we get the nitrogen that we need. The plant will also get it from other sources we'll be discussing shortly. Now, plants absorb nitrogen in the form of nitrate. So it means any way by which the nitrogen gas can be converted to nitrate is beneficial for the plant. And they find mostly this in the soil. And they use nitrogen in them to make proteins, as I've already said earlier. Animals eat the plants or other animals and get the nitrogen they need from the proteins in the plant or animal, as I mentioned previously. So for you to get your proteins, you need to feed on a plant, or you need to feed on an animal that has also fed on a plant. So the ways through which the nitrogen lost from the soil are replaced is called the nitrogen cycle. Now, nitrogen cycle refers to the series of processes by which nitrogen and its compounds are interconverted in the environment and in living organisms. What is the importance of nitrogen cycle? We are made of proteins, and plants also need proteins to form their parts or their whole being. Now, these proteins are made from nitrogen as a base. Not only nitrogen, but nitrogen forms a key element in the production of these proteins. So it helps in the growth of plants by supplying nitrogen in the form of nitrate. When nitrogen is not available, it causes the yellowing of the leaves of plants. Another thing is it's also what animals need to survive, because without nitrogen, plants are not going to be formed, and then animals are also not going to get the nitrogen they need to continue their life process. Nitrogen obtained can be used to form proteins and nucleic acids, that's DNA and RNA. I think I've mentioned that already. The balance of nitrogen gas in the atmosphere and in the soil is therefore important to both plants and animals. So moving on, we are going to look at the nitrogen cycle. And in the nitrogen cycle, we have 5 main processes. So the first process is nitrogen fixation. Second is assimilation. Third, ammonification. Fourth, nitrification. And finally, we have denitrification. So let's take the very first one, nitrogen fixation. When you hear fixation, what comes to mind? Fixing, right? What are we fixing in this instance? Nitrogen, very good. So in this instance, plants are going to get the nitrogen fixed in the form of what? Nitrate. So mostly plants are getting nitrogen fixation done through biological means. Biological means, this is where some bacteria, help in fixing nitrogen in the root nodules of legumes. Legumes help in fixing nitrogen in the soil. This is because of the bacteria which live in the root nodules of legumes. Examples of legumes include peas, beans, clover. Now, these bacteria, they live in the root nodules of legumes. So you can call it a symbiotic association. It's mutualistic in nature. It's a mutual relationship. When you talk about a mutual relationship, you are looking at one that both organisms are benefiting. So how is the bacteria benefiting? It's living in the root nodules of the legumes. And in exchange, how is the root nodules of the legumes also benefiting? The bacteria is converting the gas, the nitrogen gas, into nitrates and fixing it in the root nodules of legumes. So I come to stay in your house, and in exchange for staying in your house, what do I do for you? I help you clean up, I help you clear your space, and then I'm helpful. I can cook dinner for you and all that. That is the mutual association we are talking about. And that is what is found with rhizobium as an example of a mutualistic bacteria. So that is the very first way by which plants can get nitrogen, by fixing it directly into some plant legume nodules. Another way is also by another type of bacteria. These bacteria prefer not to live with anyone. So they are found free living. So they are referred to as free living bacteria. And this free living bacteria, they are found in the soil. So you can find them in soil, and they can fix nitrogen directly in the soil, and the plant roots will then absorb it. So because they are found freely, not depending on any root nodules or anything, they are referred to as free living bacteria. An example of such bacteria is Azotobacter. I hope you are learning a lot from this today. Very good. We have other ways by which nitrogen can be fixed. This includes lightning. So in lightning, we already mentioned that nitrogen is a gas. And once it's a gas, it's in the atmosphere. And lightning also strikes in the atmosphere. And with a strike of lightning, it comes with a high amount of energy. This energy is able to convert the nitrogen gas into nitrous oxide. And when it rains, the nitrous oxide is then dissolved in rainwater, and they seep into the soil, they leach into the soil, thereby making nitrates readily available to the plant. So in this instance, lightning is serving as another way by which nitrogen can be fixed in the soil. Another way is by combustion of fossil fuel. Automobile engines and power plants release nitrogen oxides, which are oxidized to nitrates in the soil. From nitrogen fixation, now the nitrogen has been fixed in the soil. It's in the form of nitrate. In this image, you see that nitrogen is in the atmosphere in the form of nitrate. The very first step is when nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil and root nodules of legumes convert the nitrogen gas into nitrates, what we just spoke about as the free living bacteria and the mutualistic bacteria. So now it's converted to nitrates in the soil for the plants to absorb. Another way is for fixation by lightning, where the lightning creates nitrous oxides, which seep into the soil as nitrates when it is combined with oxygen in the atmosphere. That is also another way. So that's what you see right here in this image. The next thing is for the nitrate, which is now available in the soil and in the root nodules of the legumes, to be absorbed and utilized by the plant. So the absorption and utilization of the nitrate which has been absorbed is what is referred to as assimilation. So assimilation is going to look at how the plants are inculcating and incorporating the nitrates that they absorb into building their own proteins. So the plants absorb nitrate through their root hair cells, and this is used for as a source of nitrogen to plants for growth and to prevent yellowing of leaves. Now, when you take in the nitrogen, you as a human being and the animals, the cows and the rest, when they take in the plants, then they are also assimilating that nitrate which was absorbed by the plant. The nitrate in this instance is converted to organic nitrogen. Your hair, your nails, your skin, every other part of you which is formed from protein is as a result of the nitrate which was converted to organic nitrogen. So in this picture, you have plants absorbing nitrates and using them to make proteins. Here also you have an animal going to feed on the plant, which has utilized the nitrogen to make plant proteins. Then the plant proteins also travel along the food chain, and in so doing, they've made use of the nitrates as previously discussed. The next step is the nitrate is found in you, the individual. It's found in the cow. It's found in the plant. How will this nitrate, which is now in the form of organic nitrogen, be passed on to the next stage? Remember, it's a cycle. So it means ultimately the nitrogen must be released back as nitrogen gas into the atmosphere. So to release it, you as a human being, you can release things from your body through defecation, excretion, or ultimately for the individual to die. So that is the same way that we are going to release the nitrogen as ammonia. So that brings us to the next process, which is ammonification. It's also known as mineralization. Now, in this instance, we have waste, urine and feces from animals sending nitrogen back into the soil as ammonium compounds. Example is the urea in urine, which contains nitrogen. So when one urinates, you know that you are also part of the nitrogen cycle. Also, when the animals and plants die, they decay and all the proteins inside them are broken down into ammonium compounds and put back into the soil by decomposers. So this is how we release the nitrogen now in the form of ammonia back into the soil. Again, we started with nitrogen as nitrogen gas. Fixation happened and then the nitrogen was converted to nitrates. Nitrates were then available in the plants. The plant had to assimilate and use it to build proteins. The animals also came to feed on the proteins, and it was converted to organic nitrogen. This organic nitrogen can be excreted, defecated, or ultimately decomposed into what is known as ammonium through the process of ammonification. So here you have all the processes we've listed so far being represented in this image. So this cattle can excrete, urinate, breathe, or sweat, and so doing release some of nitrogen in various forms. It can also ingest or cause decay by bacteria when it dies. So this is what you see. This cow is now dead and has released the nitrogen through decay. So after releasing through decay, the ammonium compounds are now in the soil. Unfortunately, we said the plants can only absorb nitrogen in the form of, you're right, nitrate. Well done. So in this instance, the plants can't absorb ammonium compounds. It means that another conversion has to be done. And this is where the next step comes in, which is nitrification. Nitrification means we are forming nitrates. But then this is a two-step process. So in the two-step process, we have the ammonium compounds being converted to nitrites, and then the nitrites being converted to nitrate. Then they are absorbed by the plant. Now we have gotten to the point where fixation can occur, where the ammonium compounds are converted to nitrites and then to nitrates. So this nitrate can go back to fixation. That in itself alone is a cycle. It has completed its run. But remember, we started from nitrogen gas. So we have to return to nitrogen gas. So here we have nitrification being broken down into the two steps, as we mentioned. The primary stage is where ammonia is converted to nitrite, and it's done by the bacteria known as Nitrosomonas. The next stage is when nitrite ions are converted or oxidized towards nitrate ions by Nitrobacter bacteria. So this is the two-step process. So one is done conversion of ammonia to nitrite and the other nitrite to nitrate. After this stage, the nitrate is in the soil, plants can use it, as I already mentioned, and the process can just go around in that small cycle. Or we have the final stage where now we are going to the gaseous state. So the nitrogen gas we started with would have to be released. How would this be released? There are some bacteria which are in itself unhelpful. they are also found in the soil. So while some are being helpful by nitrifying, by fixing nitrogen, there are those that are going to just remove all the hard work that we've done. And this type of bacteria is referred to as denitrifying bacteria. De means removal. So in this case, we are removing nitrogen from the soil. So finally, there is a third unhelpful type of bacteria. Mainly they are anaerobic bacteria, and they are mostly found in poorly aerated soil because they do not like oxygen, or they prefer to respire anaerobically. And these bacteria are called denitrifying bacteria. These bacteria take the nitrates out of the soil and convert them back into nitrogen gas. So farmers can help to reduce the amount of these unhelpful bacteria, that is the denitrifying bacteria, by plowing and turning over soil. When you plow and turn the soil, what are you doing? You are aerating the soil and causing oxygen to be inculcated into the soil. So that's what can be done. And this is another way by which nitrogen can be eliminated. So you see that now we've returned to the nitrogen gas that we started with. With denitrification, the bacterial species which can denitrify include Pseudomonas and Clostridium. And this is an example of such happening. The nitrates are broken down by denitrifying bacteria. Here, the nitrates in the soil are being removed and released into the atmosphere. So that is what we see right there. So in a nutshell, this is what we've done so far. We first had nitrogen gas. Nitrogen gas was fixed into the soil by nitrogen fixing bacteria, by lightning, and so on and so forth. The nitrogen fixation that happened converted the nitrogen gas into nitrate. Now this nitrate was absorbed. So this is what happened here. This nitrate was absorbed by this plant. And this plant was able to get the nitrogen in the form of nitrate to build its proteins and to build itself up. Now this nitrate being absorbed and utilized by the plant is referred to as assimilation. The plant assimilated it, and this cow also went to take in the plant and also got the plant proteins and used it in building its own proteins. That is also assimilation. After the plant and animal had gotten the nitrates and converted it into organic nitrogen, the next step was for that nitrogen to be released from the bodies of this cow and this plant. I'm talking about living organisms. So the release of the nitrogen in the form of organic nitrogen was done through the process of ammonification. In ammonification, the organic nitrogen is converted into ammonia, and this ammonia is released into the soil. Unfortunately, ammonia is not absorbed by the plant and utilized by the plant. It must be utilized in the form of nitrate. So it means that this ammonia has to also be converted into a form that the plant can use. So here is where nitrifying bacteria come in through a two-step process, where the first step is the conversion of ammonium into nitrite, and this is done by nitrosomonas, and then nitrite into nitrate by nitrobacter bacteria. Now this nitrobacter bacteria converting it into nitrate can complete a whole cycle here where it just cycles through. Yeah. Or we have some bacteria which are not beneficial also found in the soil, which release the nitrate that we've worked so hard for back into the atmosphere as nitrogen gas. This type of bacteria we are referring to as denitrifying bacteria. D because they remove nitrogen. And this is where the cycle ends and the whole process starts again. I hope you've learned a lot today. Till we meet next time, you can like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as comment any questions you may have, and they will be answered in the comment section. Thank you for your time.